The left, the media, the Democrat Party, all the same really, are focused in particular on Senator Jeff Sessions, a man I've known for decades. I want to tell you a little story. This will make sense when I'm done, so stick with me. There's a lot to get to today, but let's just get started. Perry County, Alabama, as our friend Hans von Spakovsky wrote in Conservative Review, is a rural county of about 10,000 residents in west-central Alabama, in an area known as the Black Belt for its dark, rich soil. Its population is about 70% black and overwhelmingly Democratic. Obama received 73% of the vote in 2008. The key to winning any local office in Perry County, Alabama, is to win the Democratic primary. Now, Perry County has long been plagued by accusations of voter fraud in local elections. As former Alabama Democratic Congressman Arthur Davis said, quote, the most aggressive contemporary voter suppression in the African-American community that he saw in Alabama was the wholesale manufacture of ballots at the polls and absentee in parts of the Black Belt, unquote. On April 20, 1983, a local county grand jury with a majority of black members and a black foreperson issued a report concerning problems in the balloting process that targeted the aged, infirmed, or disabled. The grand jury called for the vigorous prosecution, I'm quoting, of all violations of the voting laws, and requested the presence and assistance of an outside agency, preferably federal, to monitor our elections and to ensure fairness and impartiality for all. These are black grand jurors seeking outside, preferably federal law enforcement support, because the black Democrat machine in Little Perry County, Alabama, is screwing blacks who are trying to challenge it. But Jeff Sessions, the United States Attorney in the region, did not open a federal investigation into the 1982 election. In his Senate questionnaire for Attorney General nomination, he explains that he was hoping it wouldn't be necessary, that the county grand jury report would cause local activists to conform to the law. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. Instead, as Levon Phillips, a black legal assistant in the Perry County District Attorney's Office, later testified, his office received numerous complaints during the 1984 election cycle. Black voters and incumbent black officials reported that voters were receiving absentee ballots they had never requested. Moreover, he testified that local candidate Albert Turner was illegally picking up absentee ballots from voters. A handwriting expert concluded that Turner had written his own name on some of the absentee ballots. Other black voters had gone to the polls only to be told that someone had already voted in their names by absentee ballot. What was happening? What was happening in Little Perry County, Alabama? Well, Perry County was embroiled in an intense political fight, pitting one set of black Democratic candidates against another. But one side was apparently willing to do anything to win. All of this culminated in the 1984 Democratic primary, in which key county commission seats, as well as the tax assessor's post and other local offices, were on the line. With one exception, all the serious candidates were black. A week before the primary, Jeff Sessions, U.S. Attorney, said he received a call from District Attorney Roy Johnson informing him that two black Democratic candidates opposed by Turner, Reese Billingsley and Warren Kennard, quote, were convinced that fraud was occurring in the election, unquote. Turner and others were collecting large numbers of absentee ballots that, quote, were being taken to a central headquarters where the ballots were altered to ensure that they were marked for candidates endorsed by Turner, unquote. Billingsley and Kennard had information that the altered ballots would be taken to the county post office the night before the election to be mailed. They were extremely concerned about the election and believed it was being stolen from them. And sure enough, the night before the election, Turner and his wife Evelyn showed up at the post office with more than 300 ballots. Remember, it's a tiny county. While their co-conspirator, Spencer Hogue, showed up with another 170 ballots. All told, Turner and his minions mailed 504 of the 729 absentee ballots cast in that election. Now, according to Jeff Sessions, FBI analysts show that at least 75 of the ballots had been altered, and 25 voters said they had not given their ballots to the Turners or Hogue for mailing. Listen to this. One African-American family of 6 voters, the Sheltons, testified that they had not given permission to change their votes, particularly since the candidate they had originally voted for was their cousin. Now, caught red-handed, ultimately Turner admitted changing the Sheltons' absentee ballots. A 34-page federal indictment by the grand jury was filed on January 5, 1985, and it lays out in great detail the actions of the Turners and Hogue in the voter fraud case. The object of the conspiracy was to elect the candidates they had supported and endorsed. According to the indictment, they used Evelyn Turner's position as a notary public to witness absentee ballots falsely in furtherance of the conspiracy. The indictment also gives the lie to the spurious claim recently made by former Massachusetts Governor Deval Patrick, a member of the Turner-Hogue defense team. In a letter to the Senate Judiciary Committee, Patrick claims that Sessions based the case on the legal theory that it was a federal crime for someone to help someone to vote or to advise them how they should vote, even if and when they asked for such help. As the indictment makes clear, that was not the theory of the case. Neither the Turners nor Hogue were prosecuted for assisting voters. The indictment charges them with picking up absentee ballots to open and fraudulently change those ballots that had not been marked for candidates supported and endorsed by the defendants. They were prosecuted for allegedly casting, quote, false, fictitious, spurious, and fraudulently altered absentee ballots, unquote. Yet somehow the left, as you will hear tomorrow, as you've undoubtedly read, would have us believe that this was a racist prosecution. It is a totally fabricated claim, spun from thin air by Senator Ted Kennedy, a commie in my view, and his allies to block the 1986 appointment of Sessions to the federal bench, and it has now been resurrected by the NAACP and the Democrats. Now, I'm going to continue with this. It's very, very important. They're going to bring up a lot of trash against Sessions, but this is one of the key areas where they're going to try and get you to believe that he's a racist. When in fact, ladies and gentlemen, those who are manufacturing the charges against Sessions, they are the racists. They are the racists who want to deny Jeff Sessions the attorney generalship that the president-elect Donald Trump wants to give to him. They're the ones who fear Sessions, not because he's a racist, but because he's a conservative. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Let us continue the story of Perry County, Alabama, so you're more familiar with it than anybody, and so you know the lies that will and have been perpetuated about it. It's had nothing to do with white versus black. Zero. And Sessions only got involved reluctantly after the locals kept insisting on federal help. A December 28, 2016 interview, this is a short time ago, with Craig Donsanto confirms the deception. Now retired, Donsanto was the longtime head of the Election Crimes Unit inside the Justice Department's Public Integrity Section of the Criminal Division, at the U.S. Department of Education. He was a long-time civil servant. Don Santo, who's now retired, was well known in the U.S. election community and was a nationally recognized expert on election crimes. He worked under Democrats and Republicans. Don Santo wrote the Justice Department's Manual on Federal Prosecution of Election Offenses, which is distributed to the 93 United States Attorney's offices across the country. During his more than 40 years as a federal prosecutor, Don Santo was the go-to authority inside the Department of Justice for all election crime prosecutions, including the Perry County case. No one could file such a case without getting his consent. Don Santo remembers the Perry County, Alabama case very well. Indeed, he was in Alabama at the federal courthouse when the grand jury voted to return the indictment, thereby initiating the formal charges. Don Santo told von Spakovsky, quote, "No federal prosecutor faced with the evidence seen by the grand jury would have failed to take the case and go forward with the prosecution. The evidence in the case was overwhelming. I was there with the other assistant U.S. attorneys, and no one dissented. Everyone thought it was a solid case. I told Jeff Sessions to go forward with the case." Unquote. Actually, Don Santo did more than that. He helped prepare the indictment. And Don Santo is highly offended by any claims that the prosecution was racist. The federal prosecutors were trying to protect black voters who were having their votes stolen, he said. Moreover, the investigation was initiated only after local black voters and candidates complained to the federal Justice Department. When asked about the fact that a jury found the defendants not guilty, Don Santo says that as a former federal prosecutor, he respects the jury system. But there's no question in Don Santo's mind that given the overwhelming evidence of wrongdoing, this was an example of jury nullification. The defendants, he notes, were local civil rights activists, and the jury was not going to find them guilty no matter what. No matter what. However, otherwise could one account for the jury, for example, discounting the testimony of all 6 members of the Shelton family. Remember? They voted for their cousin. And yet Turner was not even found guilty of changing their votes. The false claim of racism is to cover up wrongdoing in the power struggle between black Democrats in Perry County, as well as the methods used to steal absentee ballots. It's eerily similar to another voter fraud prosecution conducted by the Justice Department in nearby Greene County, Alabama, 10 years later. Craig Don Santo was also intimately involved in that prosecution. Greene County has almost the same size population as Perry County and is 80% black. And just like in the Perry County case, the Justice Department received calls from black Democratic candidates who said their election was being stolen through absentee ballot fraud by other black candidates and activists. Suitcases full of absentee ballots were brought to the county post office the day before the 1994 election. The result of the federal investigation showed that the defendants submitted hundreds of fraudulent absentee ballots created through an assembly line process that forged signatures, altered ballots, and convinced some voters to sign blank ballots. Fortunately, jury nullification didn't happen in Greene County. 11 local officials and activists were eventually convicted. But just as in Perry County, the Greene County defendants and civil rights organizations like the NAACP and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, whose treasurer was convicted in the case, falsely alleged that the prosecution was a racist conspiracy intended to suppress black voters through Gestapo tactics. The NAACP Legal Defense Fund even defended some of the vote stealers, and NAACP officials met with Attorney General Janet Reno at the time to try and convince her to drop the prosecution. John Kennard, the first black official ever elected in Greene County, was one of the candidates who first contacted the FBI. He was outraged by the accusations made against the prosecutors and by the intercession of civil rights organizations on the side of the voter fraud conspirators instead of on behalf of the black candidates whose votes had been stolen. And so I say this to you, ladies and gentlemen. the NAACP having a sit-in in Jeff Sessions' office. Other groups, ethnic groups, attacking Sessions, like the organization CARE, is appalling, it's deplorable, and it's unconscionable. For the people involved in these actions, the ends justifies the means. They could care less about their dishonesty and lack of integrity here. I've seen this all before. When I served in the Reagan administration, I've seen it all before. I saw what they did to Robert Bork. I saw what they tried to do to Clarence Thomas. I was involved in fighting off them at that time. And they're just some of the famous people. So many others, they did the same thing. They pulled this dusty file out of their drawers, and they used the same tactics. Racism. How in the world can Sessions be a racist when he stepped in to help the black community against a black Democrat machine? Turner's son, Turner, the man, among others, who Sessions was prosecuting, Turner's son is now a commissioner in Little Perry County, Alabama. And you know what he said? He supports Jeff Sessions for Attorney General of the United States. That he does not believe for a second that Jeff Sessions is racist, and he does not believe for a second that the prosecution was racist. You won't hear from him. But I just told you about it.